of course, very happy to be here for, I don't know, the N+1 thing. The topic for that conference is pushing me towards trying something new. So I decide to, to try to talk about this topic because we're talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall and try to assess the success we had since the last 30 years. So I pick up that topic, how to reach out to non-believers, identifying the best strategy to explain liberalism. And I pick up that topic without having any idea of what I would say. But I say this is something important that should be discussed. So I'll come up with some ideas, and hopefully, during the Q&A, we can, I'll be happy to hear your own opinion on that. How do we convince non-believers? Okay. I'm a professor of economics, so. The expertise I have to deal with that topic is the expertise of a teacher. I've been trying to, one of the reasons why I choose that profession to be, to teach and research is because I believe in the, because I like to learn more and because I love to convey to others whatever I've learned from my studying. And I've been doing that for 30 years. Maybe even more. So that's part of my experience. Of course, as Radu said also, I've been running that thing for about 30 years now, talking to young guys. Indeed, some of them are here. And so that's my expertise to talk to you today about how to reach out to non-believers. So in fact, trying to put my thought together, I came out with 5 points, things that seems to be important if you want to reach out to non-believers. So let me start with the first one. First, you need, that seems to be basic, but a good understanding of what liberalism is all about. Okay, which means basically the strategy means that you should work hard. It's not going to come alone. I mean, you should study, you should read, you should debate. Don't be lazy. If you have a superficial understanding of what liberalism is all about, I think you just blow up at the first discussion with the non-believers. Okay, it's kind of easy to just show that you are a ridiculous person with stupid ideas. So you need to work, okay? Liberalism is not an easy concept. I mean, it's not. And, it took us centuries to learn how to live according, or more or less according to those principles. So the reason why it took us so long to reach that point is that it's not obvious. For instance, sadly, a lot of people, when they heard about liberalism, they talk about, they think about free markets, and they associate, liberalism and free market, and this, of course, is bad, because then they believe that you care only about economics. That's the only thing. You are a very materialistic person. You don't care about things others than economics and wealth. That's all that count for you. And this, of course, is not true. In fact, as I hope you all know, liberalism belongs to political philosophy more than it belongs to economics. Okay? Liberalism is an answer to the question, how can we peacefully live together? What should be the rights of everyone? What type of rights should be left to governments? Okay? So it's about how we live together, and that's a way to present economics. It's not free market. Free market is a byproduct of that. If we have all some, privacy, property rights, then we also have the freedom to trade it, the freedom to contract or not to contract, and therefore a market develop. Market is just the process that starts as soon as you define properly property rights and the possibility to, trade those rights. Okay, it is very important that you understand that liberalism is broader than free market. Okay, don't be ashamed to say I'm in favor of free market. Of course, that's another question. Free market is important, but that's not the whole story. And don't be just labeled like someone who cares only about material things and economics. That's a wrong start. Now, good understanding is not easy. Actually, one of the reasons why it's not easy is that there are more than one understanding of liberalism, so to speak. There are fantastic books that came out the last 3 or 4 years about the various ways to defend and to explain the classical liberal position. Okay, for one thing, for instance, there are two broad approaches, and everyone knows that. Some people have a kind of consequentialist approach of liberalism. I'm in favor of liberalism because I like the consequences of liberalism. Okay? And there is a whole, branch of thought among classical liberals that argue that way. But there are other ways. Like some people like to follow more a kind of natural rights approach. I follow liberalism because that's the only political thought which is coherent with my understanding of human dignity, of human person, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now the two are important. Those are difficult debates. I mean, it's really difficult. And maybe you want to argue a little bit with the argument of one and a bit with the argument of others. But you need to make up your own mind. That's why I'm saying, to develop a good understanding will require some work, some reading, some debating with friends, because alone it's difficult to manage those big books. I mean, it's you quickly give up. I mean, all right. So it's important. So how do you do that? Let me finish with that first point. Well, go to an IES Europe seminar. That's what we do. For like we spend 1 week trying to understand a little bit better what liberalism is all about, giving you readings, discussing things during lunch, dinner for 1 week, and you need to do something like that. Maybe you can also have a club at your school, at your university, where you discuss the text every day. But even if you go to one of those seminars, and there are many, this is of course one of them, usually going to a seminar is not good enough. Going to a seminar is there to give you a taste, a desire to learn more, okay? Then you have to do your homework. Pick up a few good websites. There are good websites where you can learn and improve your own understanding, actually, of liberalism. I mean, but you do that by trying to understand others' understanding. For instance, Liberty Fund website, fantastic. I don't know how many of you are aware of that website. You know the Liberty Fund website? Yeah, I mean, I know you. If you don't, go there. They have all kinds of topics, of kinds of free readings. There is now, they come up with a discuss book every week. I mean, it's really well done. Cato is good. Cato is trying to find the classical liberal attack or angle on usually it's very policy-oriented things, and that's important to see how they are. I send all my students to the Cato website. Whenever they work on, I say, go and first look at what Cato is doing. Because then they take expert on all the topics and they try to tackle it in an interesting way. I like, for me, for instance, I look at Café Hayek because I like Don Boudreau. Don Boudreau has been lecturing for us for many, many years. I just love him, the way he argues. He's one of my heroes. And, Café Hayek, for instance, for me, that's one of the things I will look at. Actually, they had something on the, Don is a fantastic guy. Anyway, learn liberty. That's sometimes good. If you rather watch videos, you go there and don't read everything. But why don't I watch that 5 minutes video on that topic or that one? Okay, see how that guy is arguing, because I might have to argue with my colleagues at school on those things, and I'm not sure I have the right argument. So it's, do that. Okay, so that was my first point. If you want to reach out to non-believers, you have to be yourself intellectually strong. Intellectual. So this is intellectual strength. Okay. Now, second point, and there are, I'm not sure there is an order. Probably you need, for the cake to be good, you probably need all those ingredients, and one alone will not be enough. So my second point, if you want to reach out to non-believer, you need to be able to explain the beauty of liberalism. Okay, why should we opt for that system? Why should we choose that system? Okay, so here maybe show compassion, concern. Show to whoever you are arguing with that we do share the same goal, okay? We want a more beautiful world. We want a more peaceful world. We love when people cooperate to try to solve real problem of real life. So this is, try to touch the art of whoever you are discussing with, okay? Again, if the only thing they understand is that you are a free market guy and that you think that the state should be out, that's of course that's true, but that's not gonna make a big crowd following you, okay? And the guy says, okay, that I know already, but and that's it. He won't even listen, longer to what you have to say. So really show the beauty of the thing, that it might bring peace and prosperity. And this again is not that simple. Of course, it's easy to say, and we should have that in mind. I'm trying to touch not only the intellectual, but I'm also talking to a soul, to art. So that's easy to say, but that's not easy to realize. Why? Well, for all kinds of reasons. But for one of them, for instance, we all know it's not that easy to use history to show that freedom works. Okay? We can use that, and we should do it. And there are, if you look at the work from our friends, for instance, from the Fraser Institute and or Heritage, they have all those freedom index, and they show you how strong is the correlation between freedom and prosperity, and freedom and human rights, and freedom and good environment, and this is good. I mean, the Nomen Stiftung, I think, is also publishing this type of work, or usually kind of European version of those indexes, and this is important. But that's a way to start, probably not enough. I mean, then, because people can have counter-arguments. This is due to the complexity of social phenomena. You can always come up with something and say, you see, your thing doesn't work. It's hard. If history was enough to show that liberalism is better, then I guess, that's it. The debate will be over. Problem will be solved already, okay? So we should attempt to do that, but at the same time, we should be aware that we will not win the entire argument with that. That won't be enough. And be ready to counter-argument. Some guy can come up with other correlations that are, so we should do that. I just, as I was preparing those notes, I came into a paper that Emily Shamli writes with the CEO of IHS, so the Institute for Human Studies, she just wrote a paper on the fall of the Berlin Wall, and here is what she says. Here is a difficult truth about liberalism. It does not promise that there will be no problems, okay? But the problem-free social order is not on the menu of options. And I think she's totally right. I mean, usually classical liberal thinkers are intellectually honest, and they know that liberalism will not bring paradise on earth. Okay, it's probably the best way to live together, taking into account, all our limitation, all our, biases and all our vices, but also all our potential as creators and so on and so forth. But we know it's not perfect, okay? And we have to explain that, that it's successful, it's not perfect, but it's better than the others. So it's not an easy task. If you are not aware of that website, I like a lot, and this are our friends of Cato again. What the human project story. You talked about that already? Progress, yeah. I was saying their project, and the project is human progress. Humanprogress.org. I think this is interesting, and because it might give you some data, it might give you a lot of things if you want to discuss with others. Okay, they try to put facts beyond that intuition that it works and it works better than the other system. And human progress is due to all those people who have been behaving as entrepreneurs in whatever field they were working on. There are a lot of smart guys behind the projects. I mean, they've gathered almost all the people who have been working on that. I don't know, Deepak Lai, McCloskey, Johan Norberg. I mean, it's a nice project. Might give you. So third point, if you want to reach out to non-believers, this is something which actually the human project thinks is a good transition. Resist the temptation of being always negative, criticizing opponents, and depicting a despiteful world. Okay, so I don't know how to put it in short. Maybe don't be too negative. I don't know what your experience in Romania is, but I can tell you my experience about classical liberals in France. And we have, because I'm consider myself as part of the group. We have that tendency of always, of course, being criticizing what the government is doing, what that silly politician is saying, and then so out of your mouth come only negative statements. They are stupid, they don't understand anything, they have no culture, they never read a book in their life, how can you damn be that stupid, and so on and so forth. And even though this is true, again, I don't think you're going to convince people like that. After a while, you came out to be looked at as someone who is always criticizing and very rarely make any constructive proposition on what we should do. I don't know. You criticize that system to help the poor, the last I don't know, universal income scheme or whatever, and you say this is bad. This is okay. If tomorrow you are at the government, what is your proposition? What is your safety net? Are you planning to have none? Okay, so say it clearly and be ready to show that I have compassion, but I think we should entirely leave that to the private sector. It's a tough statement. If that's your statement, okay, do it. If not, maybe say, okay, this will be a better scheme instead of that scheme. So try each time you criticize to add something after to which is constructive, like a proposition. Here is, in my opinion, what should be done. Okay, I've been running with Chris here actually and some others a new magazine in France called Journal des Libertés. If you read French, you should try to visit our website. You can download all the paper for free. Journal des Libertés. It has been on for a year and a half now. And so it's a trimester. Every 3 months, we come up with 200 pages, which are supposed to explain classical liberal thinking to people because we believe our ideas are not well known. Okay? okay? Or people believe they know about it, but they don't. They associate it to free market, for instance, why, in fact, it is more than free market, okay? And as a general editor of the journal, I have a hard time to find people, you know, related to our group that will write something positive. You know, I only have submission of paper criticizing this and this and that, okay? Or, you know, saying, you know, okay, we know that in the 19th century, and then he will go with the solution we put forward in the 19th century, you know, which is so that show that this you know, just this gap in the way we try to communicate our ideas, I think. Criticizing is a necessary thing to do, of course, but it's not sufficient. We need then to be more productive. We need to give stories of success. There are things that works, and they are successful. And this should be known. If you see around you a nice private initiative to solve this or that, you should try to write something in the newspaper. We don't give, you know, on TV, don't count on them really to give you those good stories. You know, they rather give you failure story and then explain that the state can fix the problem. So we need to say, no, that's not true. There is an author which I venerate very much, Elinor Ostrom. I don't know if you know about her work. She was until 2 weeks ago the only woman that received the Nobel Prize of Economics. Esther Duflo received it 2 weeks ago. I mean, honestly, I think you learn more reading Ostrom than reading Esther Duflo. But you can maybe watch the TED video of Esther Duflo. In 15 minutes, you'll know what she does. Which is interesting, but I don't think it has the power of what Elinor Ostrom was doing. Elinor Ostrom spent her entire life with a team to study how people find solutions to all kinds of problems by some kind of voluntary agreement, by putting together institutions without the help of the state. Okay, fishermen in Turkey, people in the Alps, you know, in the Swiss Alps, or you know, water in California, or you know, people, they see a problem, they get together, they find a solution. Does not always work, and then she tries smartly to understand when it is likely to work, when it doesn't work, what it takes for the thing to have some chance to work. You need to be able to monitor the behavior of people. You need some form of sanction if someone. So we need things like that. You know, we should not just say, okay, well, you know, no, give example. Give example that maybe we don't always need the state to solve problems. And I'm sure there are tons of people doing wonderful things. I mean, and there is even probably some literature out there which I don't know enough about. At the Institute of Economic Affairs, was it David Green or someone like that, that written a huge book on friendly society some years ago? And I mean, anyway, there are probably already things out there, but it's good to have them, if only when you argue with friends that tend to believe that if the state is not doing the thing, then nothing will be done. You know, if you come up with a long list of examples, read Elinor Ostrom books on the governing the commons. You know, people care about the environment today. They care about ecology and all those things. Most of the topics she was dealing with are related to this type of problem, okay? This type of concern, managing common pool resources. Okay, fourth, sorry. Fourth, be respectful. Okay, be respectful of non-believers. Don't be arrogant. Listen. Listen to what they have to say. Now, I think, and again, this is my experience after some 40 plus years in the movement, definitely one of the main characteristic of true classical liberal is that they are humble, okay? They are humble in the sense that they know the limit of their knowledge. Okay, they are aware that they don't have necessarily the perfect solution. Actually, that's why we rely on entrepreneurship. That's why we like laboratory to find the right solutions. Okay, because we don't know most of the time. Okay. But another characteristic, at least in France, but in other circles, and I mean classical liberal circle, is that they are sometimes arrogant. They, especially the young ones, and you're young, but not always only the young one. I mean, again, I can tell you, people I work with for the journal, they know they have the truth. And they tend to consider all the others as damn stupid. And this is bad. And actually, if you take seriously, your liberalism, you realize that it is not that simple. Okay, liberalism started by the idea that we should use reason to try to have a better world, enlightenment. Okay. But then, of course, some people, there is an abuse of reason. This is, of course, the project of Friedrich Hayek. This is opposing sometimes the French Enlightenment, people who believe that with reason they're going to build a new world out of crash, And the Scottish Enlightenment, people who want to use reason, like Smith, Hume, and the others, and Ferguson, but at the same time they know the limit of their knowledge. Okay? So my point is that, where do you exactly draw the line between using reason and the abuse of reason? It's not that simple. Come on, I mean, and you should, we should not, and actually, in the Western civilization, people were, abusing reason, but it took us a while and some million deaths to realize, that they were abusing. Many intellectuals did not react at the proper time. And then, Hitler and all those fancy guys, well, not that fancy, they could develop, no intellectuals really opposed to them, I mean, not enough, okay? So it's not easy to draw the line. So if someone does not draw the line exactly where you draw the line between what is abusing reason and what is just a fair use of reason, don't treat that person as a damn stupid ignorant. I mean, it's just that is difficult. One of the key concepts of classical liberalism is the concept of spontaneous order. Okay, the idea that things might work well in some framework, even though no one is trying to organize or to direct the process. Okay? So things will spontaneously work out well and give you prosperity. And I mean, this is a very counterintuitive idea to some extent. Okay? So you should not, again, rank everyone who does not immediately get the idea as a stupid person. Okay, because this is difficult, the idea. Now, if you look at real life, of course, you see that spontaneous order all around you. Okay, but it's not obvious. That's why little essays like "I the Pencil" are so important, because they try to convey. Who has read "I the Pencil"? That little. There is a nice video now. You haven't read that? You should read that. This is a very short thing, which is trying to explain this very essential idea. So the eye is a pencil, it's a pencil, and the idea is that no one in real life knows how to do a pencil. And no one has been organizing the making of the pencil from A to Z. And no one possibly could do that because no one has the knowledge, the capacity. So the idea of eye pencil is writing a little essay to try to explain that really key idea among classical liberals, the idea of spontaneous orders, that things can work. We can do that marvelous thing called a pencil and sell it for, I don't know, 5 cents, almost nothing. Well, if you're quoting Don Boudreaux, and I remember when it was teaching for IES, and that was the time where we will use pencil more than now. He will go to one of the participants, he will take the pencil and break it. And then, the student, was of course a bit surprised, his teacher must be crazy, but then he will go on from there saying, well, okay, you are maybe surprised, but you are not that upset. It's not like if I break your computer, and then starting from there, he will explain to students, the story of the pencil, that in fact is a cooperation between literally millions of people. By the way, exactly the same story was in Adam Smith. You read Adam Smith after the Pin Factory, the first page of the World of Nations. There are 2 or 3 pages where he says, just enter, push the door of the apartment of a poor worker, and look at what you see in that apartment, and you'll see, for instance, that there is a coat on the chair, and then he goes on 3 or 4 pages showing that in order to make that coat, literally hundreds of thousands of people have been cooperating that never met each other actually, and see that coat is here on the chair of in that apartment of a poor worker. Okay, so this is a key idea, but it's not an idea easy to understand. I mean, Smith is trying to take example. The high pencil thing is also so that's another reason why we should not be arrogant. Now, I think it's very important whenever you try to convince someone to listen to that person, okay? Not just say, I'm going to give a lecture to that person. I'm going to give him or her a lecture on liberalism, okay? I don't think this is, it's better to try to listen, to identify where actually your thinking departs, where is that person starting from? Maybe sometimes they have some historical fact. Oh, for instance, how many people believe that the 1929 economic crisis was a crisis of capitalism, and that thanks to Roosevelt and the New Deal and his socialist program, we were able to get out of capitalism. Out of the crisis, I'm sorry, okay? This is the understanding of history, I'm sure, of 2/3 of the people, okay? So once you understand that, then you say, okay, well, let's start from there. There are a couple of books that discuss, the origin of the crisis. And there are a couple of books also on the impact of what Roosevelt had been doing. And because now you know why that guy is not interested in looking into liberalism. He's not interested in looking into liberalism because he believes this has been tried, it has failed, and obviously the state was the solution out. Okay, so he has closed doors to further thinking on the topic. So you should start from where that person is blocked somehow, and won't join you. Okay, and in order to do that, you need to really listen to that person with trying to understand, not just listen, okay, you had your turn to speak, now it's my turn to speak. No, really listen. Try to understand how that person understands the thing. As we said earlier, liberalism is often misunderstood. So you need to identify, what it is that that person has not really understood. I don't know, for instance, when I discuss with people, some of the thing, and I had a recent discussion on that, some of the things that bother them is the fact that I will tell them that I feel oppressed by the state. And they don't feel that. They don't feel that. People tell me, but your language is much too strong. The other time, with another friend, we were talking about slavery, modern slavery. And then we received tomatoes, eggs, and everything. And how can you dare to speak about modern slavery? Damn it, this is an attack on the true slave, blah, 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 blah. So But that's important. I realize that indeed my expression was very counterproductive. Even though I do feel some oppression, I mean, I'm sick and tired of working for the state and giving to the state 70% of any extra euro I'm making. So I do feel that oppression, and I'm ready to argue that, this is a form of oppression, but be careful, if you say that similar to slavery, then you might block the people entirely, and that's something you should be. I guess that's the reason why I like, and I was this morning looking at picture of people like Hayek, what I like in Hayek, for instance, is that he was always very respectful of the people he was talking to, or even when he writes. I mean, obviously, he always writes for people that he believes are smart. He considers his opponent or his contradictors as smart people, and he's trying to convince, to appeal to their intelligence, and to Friedman is alike. In another style, Friedman is always respectful. I mean, he's more aggressive, of course. He's more like like a little dog, trying to bite. But always with a big smile and a friendly way. I don't know if you watch the video from Friedman. Okay, so don't be arrogant. And again, our things is not that simple. Let me, to close on that point, let me tell you what will be a typical discussion between the French classical liberal and a journalist. And this happened to me a couple of times, and I know now that I should just argue differently, and I should take stories. I should take stories and explain to people via concrete examples. Because the typical, and I remember doing that, you organize a conference, and then you have a journalist that, nicely come to you and say, okay, you have a one-week conference here. What are you talking about? Okay, we are presenting how liberalism can be helpful for the modern world. Okay, all right, and then you will take some time trying to explain, for instance, spontaneous order. I mean, even if you don't mention, you will explain that I personally don't have, for instance, the best solution for how to educate people, but as a classical liberal, I put my faith in a kind of entrepreneurial process where everyone will be allowed to offer his or her own way of teaching to kids, and I believe that from that discovery process probably will come new ways of teaching, and maybe different ways, because maybe we need different things. We are not all done the same way. So what works with one kid maybe doesn't work with another kid, and so maybe we need different type of school, not the same for everyone. So you try to explain that to the lady. You, of course, on the way, criticize, what the minister has been doing, what this silly minister of education is proposing, going in the wrong direction. And the journalist, after listening to you, she will go back and say, okay, so what did I learn? And I remember a couple of times the type of article you have the next day in the newspaper is something like, well, the classical liberals are gathered in Aix-en-Provence, France. They are discussing education. They all say that the present system has many shortcomings, but they also say that as classical liberals, they don't have the solution. And of course, that's not exactly what I told the ladies the previous day, but that, because I was trying to tell her, the idea of spontaneous order. I don't have the knowledge, but I do believe that if you let people try various ways for education, probably out of that will come something great. But the poor journalist, which is not used to that type of thinking, they say, well, the professor says there is no solution that he can think of, and she might forget or drop, the rest of the, okay? So we should not be arrogant, we should listen. Our ideas are not that easy to convey, we should keep that in mind. And maybe for that reason, again, think about proposition and don't, little stories might sometimes work much better than trying to explain what the spontaneous order is, which is, to explain that to a journalist in 1 hour is difficult. Fifth and last, and I don't know, we are, I would say, be coherent. And I don't know how to say that. That's where my English is. What I mean here is that your life should be linked to what you claim. I'm a Christian, and very early I was taught, and my life shows that this is probably true, that to believe is a gift from God. Okay, I mean it's not because you think hard that you're going to become a believer. At least this is a position of the Catholic Church. I mean, maybe you want to scrap all that, but that's the position. And I remember I was a bit, and the Pope told me that. I mean, it was not just, because I remember it was we went to Rome and there was a discussion with the Pope. The Pope, it was John Paul II. He liked to talk to students, and so we were a bunch of students went to talk to the Pope, and so one of the students says, we try to convince our colleague, that this is beautiful and so on and so forth. They should come with us and follow us in religion, but they don't. So what can we do? And the Pope say, I remember that. I mean, he says, well, faith is a gift from God. So it means, you should do your best. But somehow, okay. So whether or not you are with me in that story, the fact is, what can we do, and what can maybe at some point bring something if it is not just pure intellectual debate about what a good world should look like, okay? And I think it's probably the way you behave that might light a little candle somewhere and say, well, maybe I should look a little bit more carefully at what liberalism is all about. Okay, so that's what I have in mind, and that that's what my whole life, shows. I mean, I'm usually personally, and I'm sure it's the same for you, attracted towards discovering what people who look like nice people do and think. Okay, if I meet with someone, if I don't know, if I feel that person has a good, I had good feeling about that person, then I'm curious to know, what that person believes. And the reverse is true. If I meet with someone who looks really nasty or I don't know unpleasant or it doesn't match, then I'm not interested. I mean, think about the nice guy that will you have good relationship and says I've written a book. Then you are curious. You want to go and read the book. If you see the same guy, maybe the book is fantastic, but the guy is so unpleasant, you don't want to open the book. Okay, so that's what I have here in mind. Okay, so be aware, and this goes, by the way, and a lot of people talk about that last summer at the summer university, and we have some expert in communication here. To say things differently, you should be aware of the fact that it's not necessarily what you say, and even less what you say today during that conversation, that will change the mind of the person you are talking to. Okay, you need to give her the desire to look in your direction, and maybe the thing that people will pay attention to might be the way you dress, maybe the way you talk, maybe your voice, maybe the way you interact during the discussion. Okay, those are the things that are really important. Okay, so if your desire is to, make sure that after 30 years of the Berlin Wall, we finally turns, more frankly towards a free society and freedom, then you probably want to pay attention to that. Okay, If the classical liberal society is perceived as a bunch of crooks, you won't go anywhere. I mean, you must be perceived as a bunch of nice guys. You must be a bunch of nice guys. Usually it is. Usually it is. But maybe sometimes we don't pay enough attention to the details. All right, that were my 5 points. And we have plenty of times now for discussion. As I said, I don't claim much expertise on that topic. I think it's an important topic. Obviously, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, as Grassen and others probably have been expressing during that seminar, we are far from where we would like to be. There is still, I can, if you want, tell you about the situation in France, for instance. Grassen has been talking about Central and Eastern Europe. So we are not there. So if we are not there, it's because we are not able to reach out to more people. We are not able to make more believers. Of course, I'm using believer in a kind of rhetoric way. So that's why I was trying to look at my what I've learned, and I come up with those 5 things. It's probably not exhaustive. There are probably other things you should be worried about. But again, if you want to convince first, be sure you are on strong grounds yourself. Okay. Show compassion, concern, okay? Even the word we use, be careful the word we use, don't be always negative, don't criticize, be able to come up with positive stories, showing to people that it works, that freedom, bears some nice fruit. Take simple stories, sometimes have much more impact than, tons of graphs and stats and things of that. Don't be arrogant, listen to people, and then finally, behave in such a way that people want to discover a little bit more about you and about your thinking. One, believe or know and understand. My impression is that the two goes together, okay, in the sense that, and again, I apologize for being a bit personal, okay? But I think I was a classical liberal. I mean, I was a liberal very early in my life, and I remember, and I wrote a piece not long ago, I was using, when I was 18, or to try to explain that thing, I was explaining that I'd rather have one natural flower than a bunch of plastic flowers, okay? So my idea that I like things which are voluntary. You are not forced. For me, solidarity through the state, it's like plastic flowers. I mean, people don't do things because they believe it's important. They do things because they are taxed, because they... So that was my intuition. And therefore my belief that it was a matter of belief at that time. It's my belief. That means that's no proof. That's just a strong belief, a strong, something you feel. And then I start to learn more. But as you learn, of course, as we said, you improve your understanding. But you're never totally there, because there is no point where you say, okay, now I have the proof, like I have the proof that God exists. And if that was the case, then it will no longer be a matter of belief. It will be entirely a matter of showing where the truth is. Okay, but I think again that maybe another way to put it is that, you see what I mean? It's a process where you, at each point in time, there is a little bit of belief that it's in that direction that we should search. And of course, also some argument that start to be more articulated, more convincing, and so on and so forth. And that's how we move forward, I think. So I think you should make it less and less a matter of belief. But I think there will. That's why those things are difficult to argue. That's why maybe I should not use the word belief. But I think you see what I mean when I use that word. I think it's in that direction. And others believe that it's another direction that the solution is. They believe the solution is toward more state, is toward more compulsory, mandatory policies. On that point, yeah. Again, economics is not the same thing as liberalism, okay? And what I would say about economics is not necessarily true about liberalism. I think economics is a science. I think it's a science with its specificity, so it's a science different from others. But to put it, and as people like Hayek, when you talk about catalaxy and so on and so forth, it's the science of the spontaneous orders. That's what economics was all about. It's trying to explain some social phenomena and try to explain that key idea that sometimes, even though there is no organization, the result. So this is really a scientific matter. I mean, it doesn't end up with a rule and prediction, which are as precise as in other fields of knowledge, but still it's a science. Liberalism belongs to philosophy, so I don't know if you want to call philosophy a science. There are philosophers here, so I don't want to upset anyone. And so it's basically what is a wise way to live together. Okay, so here probably I will be more inclined to talk about beliefs. I believe that system will give better results. And I think economics should not claim too much. Economists often claim too much, but I think there is and we should limit economics to what it should be, which is a study of interaction, the study of spontaneous order, so that's economics. Now, of course, economists, they tend to want to do, all kinds of things and so on and so forth. So that's, I think that Christ was not trying to tell us how to live together in details. I think it's hard to find, because you can also quote, the famous thing, give back to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. I mean, my kingdom is not from here. So basically, it was more trying, that's my understanding, it was more trying how you personally live a good life, okay, well, what it is to live a good life, and indeed, if you are a minister, you should consider yourself as a servant of others, and than offering any political system, okay? But, we're not going to redo here all the debates that, it took the church quite a long time, for instance, because you talk about democracy. I mean, there were discussions in the 4th century about property rights, because, the goods are, made for everyone. So why should someone claim any exclusivity on some good? So the founding father of the church were, they had to discuss. And one guy said, "Oh, but so I think his name was Anselm that said, no, God did that for everyone, not just for one guy in particular. The famous universal destination of goods. That's a strong thing in the church. But at the same time, St. Chrysostom will say, oh, but if you don't own anything, how can you be charitable? I mean, you don't own anything. I can be charitable with things that belongs to others. That's not true charity. Charity is giving your time, your money, your effort. Own money, own effort. You need some property. Anyway, so there was long debate, before we reached the system. So to make my answer short, I think that the type of society that the classical liberal is trying to promote is perfectly compatible with all the teaching of the church. That's my belief. But my belief is not that the teaching of the church says this is that system that we need. I mean, actually, that system, as you know, it took us centuries to develop it. I mean, it probably started to make it, to be stable, I don't know, around the, 17th century, 18th century? It took us like 1800 years to reach there. This idea that we should be respectful of the others, that the king should not rule upon us, that, it's a long process that led us here. So, but it's important, and now that you mentioned that, a lot of Christians believe that the classical liberal is opposed to the thing that conservative Christian is fighting for. And this, I think, is wrong. Actually, I put the name of that guy on that Liberty Fund website. There is this a weekly newspaper. In the last one, or maybe last week, there was a paper by Sam Gregg. Sam Gregg, who worked for a long time for the Acton Institute. If you want Christian that says interesting things, and I think coherent things on how classical liberalism can articulate with Christian faith, people who don't mix up everything, sometimes then you go to, and Sam Gregg, for instance, reacts on a book that was trying to develop some Thomistic approach to economics. And some Greg, with you know, is a strong believer, and then they say, you know, this is a mistake because it confused everything. And you know, economics is economics. St. Thomas is great, you know, but like Thomistic economics, you know, is probably creates more misunderstanding than anything else. So again, those are difficult issues, and we need to work on those things. It's not easy. By the way, maybe part of your question was whether it was a good idea for me to choose that title for the talk. Like the fact that I mentioned believers, non-believer. I don't know, I have to think about it. I put it there because that's what came out of my mind. But indeed, I should be careful. Like maybe it's a bad idea to refer to believers and non-believers in terms of communication. You know, maybe in terms of communication, this is even a silly idea that will kill all my talk. So maybe I should think. You know, that this is a type of thing. But I consider talking to you like talking to friends. I mean, we discuss something, so you know, and this is not published yet. I mean, there's nothing written except on that piece of paper. So it's all right. More questions?